Hello, everybody. I'm the Korn Man. I'm here with the old man. We're going to talk about the Three Stooges, a little bit of the history. We're going to review three short subjects of theirs today. They're all curlies. It's going to be, let's see how I screw up. It's going to be Woman Haters, A Plumbing We Will Go, and Halfwit's Holiday. But before we get started on that, I'm going to have the old man tell you a quick, brief history about how they came to be.
Okay, the Stooges basically started out in Mo Howard's family. Their name really was Horowitz, but they changed it, which a lot of Jewish entertainers did back then. They changed their name to Howard. And it was basically five brothers in their family: Irving, Jack, Sam, who was always called Shemp, Mo, and Jerry, who was Curly. Well, Mo and Shemp got the acting bug, and they marched out on around 1919, and they went into vaudeville. And they pretty much did little song and dance and little jokes and things, I'm sure, which most vaudevillians did little acts. And they were spotted by a guy named Ted Healy, who was also in vaudeville, and he became fast friends with Mo and convinced Mo to join him in an act with his wife. And I think Ted was the first one who came up with the idea that, tell him a joke and if it's got a pun ending to it or something, give him a smack or whatever. And after a few years of working with Ted, they met Larry Fine, who was working with his wife and her sister. They were the Haney sisters and Fine, and they had more of a musical act. And they convinced him to join the act. And they went together for about 4 or 5 years like this with this group. And then Shemp got a great offer to work as a solo on another short subject series.
He wasn't too crazy about Ted Healy either, from what I understand.
No, him or Larry, either one didn't like him. And the problem with Ted Healy was the problem of a lot of entertainers in those days. He indulged a little too much in alcohol. He was an alcoholic, and he could be, again, if you've never known any alcoholics, some of them can be very mean and nasty when they're drinking. Mo would usually forgive him because he and Mo were fast friends. But eventually it just got to be too much for Mo. They had brought Curly into the act about a year or two before they actually broke with Ted Healy because, like I say, Shemp had moved on. And Mo decided we're giving this up with him. It's just he's going to drag us down to his level. We're good, three good comics. We're going to call ourselves the Three Stooges, which was when they first decided to use that name, and see what they could do on their own. And the story I got in Mo's book was that he went out looking to different studios looking for a contract. Larry went out to studios looking. Larry got a contract, a pretty good one, from Universal. But Mo also got one from Columbia. Well, they both didn't know what to do. They got a hold of some lawyers, and the lawyers looked, and Mo's date stamp and time was about an hour earlier than Larry. So the lawyer says, you're officially with Columbia. That's how they started with Columbia, and then they started this long string of shorts, which we're starting with here today.
That's interesting. So if they'd have been with Universal, where Abbott Costello eventually went to, I wonder if but that was years later maybe. I wonder if they'd have gone to Columbia or not. I don't know what would have happened there, but I guess the Stooges would have made movies with Universal, which is interesting to think of. But
they could have. And I always thought it was interesting, to me, Lou Costello took a lot of Curly shtick. He did a lot of Curly stuff. Not copy him word for, but I think he was definitely influenced by Curly.
Yeah, and I think too, especially with younger people today, if they see the Three Stooges, it's black and white, and like, oh, it's archaic, it's old. But a lot of comedians, I think even probably today, their Curly style, the Three Stooges style, still lives on. They've had a huge influence on pop culture.
And I think it was one of the hardest acts to do. When you think about it, there were a lot of those knockabout, they used to call them knockabout comics, where they did physical comedy, where they knock each other around. It looks easy when the Stooges do it, but you watch anybody else, even the remakes they've made of these films, guys playing the Stooges, it's not the same. It was definitely an art, what they did. I mean, they made it look funny without looking painful, particularly.
Yeah, and I hope everybody still, remembers them and has a chance to watch them. Talking about that, growing up for me, they were on KPOR 11 St. Louis. and they were on Saturday nights like midnight to 2 in the morning.
Wow.
So it was tough, to get. But and as a kid, you sometimes I try to stay up. Your eyes would get heavy and watch. And I have a real good story to tell you really quick. I had a lot of sleepovers with my cousin Bryce. We were probably about 9, 10 years old. And one Saturday night, we decided to stay up. We're going to watch Three Stooges. And of course, Bryce, kind of the rebel he was, he said, I'm kind of hungry. I need a midnight snack. He goes into the kitchen, comes back with a big bowl of Cookie Crisp. And I'm a little like, gosh, we're staying up past midnight. Now he's got a bowl of Cookie Crisp. If we get busted, we're done. So it's about 1 in the morning now. We're watching the Stooges, and here comes my Uncle Terry. His dad comes in. What are you guys doing? It's 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, oh, man. And Bryce is like, we're watching the Three Stooges. And Uncle Terry just kind of rolls his eyes. He goes, all right, well, hold it down. And as soon as it's done, you go right to sleep. And I'm like, woo. I was kind of like Ralphie in Christmas Story.
The Stooges bailed you out?
Yeah, it's like, we're not going to die. I'm not going to be destroyed. It was great because I thought I was done. But that's just one of my experiences growing up watching them. Later, they were on TBS and some other stations. But KPLR, definitely for me, was how I got my start. How did you get your start watching the Stooges?
Mine was different. I'm being quite a bit older than Kyle here. But I was able to see them when they first came on television. They had just finished their last shorts with Joe Besser at the Columbia studio in 58. And in 59, Columbia had several TV series they were running, and somebody there at Columbia got that idea, why don't we put the Stooges on television, run those old shorts? No. They were kind of made for a half-hour kind of segment. And again, it was an independent station, Chicago, WGN, ran them. I was much luckier than Kyle. They were on at 4 o'clock every afternoon. Great timing. You get off from school, you get in the house, the Stooges are on. They would run an hour and 3 shorts at 18 minutes long with just a few commercials. Fill that hour just perfect.
See, it's funny you say that because on KPLR, they do commercials in the middle of a short.
Yeah, they never
and like,
did
that's horrible. And one other thing, sorry to interrupt you, but one other thing with me is that I remember so much as a kid when the title screen came up, if you saw Shemp, your heart kind of sank. Like, oh, man, I want Curly. Of course, now that I'm older, I appreciate Shemp much more, how funny he really was.
Yeah,
but, so many of his shorts, they were watered down. They used old footage.
Sure.
And as a kid, you always wanted Curly. And when you got Shemp, it's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Were you like that, too?
Oh, yeah, we were. And I was luckier than he was. They only showed the first couple of years of Shemp's shorts, which were his best shorts. There's no doubt about it. It was before they started doing stock footage in all of his and stuff. They were all real new shorts.
Yeah.
And those weren't bad, but yeah, as soon as you saw Shemp in the middle and not Curly, as a kid, I thought, why did they fire Curly? Why did they get rid of him? We didn't know.
And then, of course, in the 60s, you're like, oh, he's back. But it was really Curly Joe Dorita.
Yeah.
You just didn't know it at the time.
And that's funny you say that because as kids, we didn't. We thought, boy, Curly really aged. He's really changed. We didn't know because they became just a sensation when those shorts came on in 60, 59, somewhere in there. They were making personal appearances. They made feature-length films, which they could never. All the years at Columbia, they begged to make features, and they wouldn't. And all of a sudden, people were just, jumping over each other to try to get them in features. That's how there was a set of playing cards that came out, which is still probably the most expensive non-baseball set you can buy is the 59 Fleer Stooges.
Cool.
If you had that whole set, that set is worth a lot of money. And it was just a big phenomenon. It would have been, like when the Beatles came along about 5 years later. They were just, it's hard to explain to people that weren't around then just what an influence they had. And it was the same with the Stooges.
Stooge Mania.
It was.
Stooge Mania. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sit down and watch 3 of their short subjects. The first one is, I keep forgetting the name of it, Woman Haters, which was made in 34, I believe, 1934. Yeah. The second one we're going to watch is A Plumbing We Will Go, which is 1940. And then the last one is Halfwit's Holiday, which is 1947. So you got Curly's first short. You got the second one we're going to watch was 90.
About the middle.
Something, somewhere in the middle. And then the last one is Curly's the last short he was in with Stooges as a Stooge. He's actually in another one later. We might talk about that another time. But we're going to rate these. We're going to review and rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 as being, absolutely perfect, 1 being horrible. And we're going to start that now. We'll be right back to you and let you know what we think of it.
Okay.